Hey everyone, Anthony Fantano here, Internet's busiest music nerd, you know who it is, doing a quick little review of this new Nine Inch Nails EP. This is the second EP Trent Reznor has released under the Nine Inch Nails name since adding Atticus Ross full-time as sort of the second half of Nine Inch Nails, because technically the band is just him and Atticus at the moment. And I did love that EP that they dropped toward the very, very, very end of last year. That was very lo-fi. It was very rough around the edges. It ended up on my loved list. It was kind of like Trent Reznor throwing it back to the more aggressive and distorted and more industrial days of Nine Inch Nails. That was the Not the Actual Events EP. And now we have this Add Violence EP, like more than a half a year later. And this one is a bit of a sonic change, a bit of a stylistic change. It doesn't sound like Atticus is just simply playing a supportive role for Trent to go down memory lane on this new EP over here. While there are elements of it that are kind of nostalgic, it feels like at points it does have kind of a rigid, synthetic, sequenced, almost new wave vibe to it that was, very much a prominent influence on like Pretty Hate Machine. But obviously a little bit more modern, a little bit more sleek, a little bit more punchy here on this EP. You're sort of combining that with elements of the grand and somewhat atmospheric sort of soundtrack work that Atticus Ross is known for when he worked with Trent Reznor on like the Social Network soundtrack and the with the Dragon Tattoo soundtrack. So it's kind of like those two worlds colliding in a way. The intro track, as I stated in a previous Best Worst track segment, is a decent tune. I like the groove on that track. I like some of the sequenced electronics on there. It does feel like an interesting musical throwback to the 80s in a way. But, there's something about the songwriting. It's just not one of Trent's best tunes. It just kind of feels like your average 90s alt-rock tune at its very core. And I felt like if the duo had continued from there down that road, maybe we would get a few solid numbers sort of in that vein. But in fact, things get even more emotional and somber and spacier as the EP continues along. And while I do like a lot of the textures and I do like a lot of the sounds and the vibes and the moods that sort of come out of these tracks, it's very dreary. It's very despondent, occasionally beautiful. It just doesn't feel like Trent and Atticus are penning the best tunes here, especially for the next two tracks, The Lovers and This Is the Place. On the fourth cut of the EP, I feel like Trent and Atticus do really get their shit together for an exciting track that has a really climactic, distorted, sort of overbearing, but a really powerful, exciting way ending that sort of gets more and more chaotic and dense as it goes along. Like this cut for me is as amazing as anything on the Not the Actual Events EP, and actually could have maybe fit pretty snugly onto that EP, like would have felt very at home, shoulder to shoulder with the material on that thing. But then I feel like things fall off once again with the closer, which I kind of had my mouth watering for because it's like an 11-minute track. I felt like Trent and Atticus would really pull out all the stops on this thing, but yet again, it just ends up being about as average a tune as the opening cut. And then the song reaches a point where this beat, this riff, this groove that they hit upon just repeats and repeats and repeats until the song ends, as more and more distortion is sort of added to this sound wave, and it just sort of crushes it and crushes it and crushes it until it's like this gurgling sort of like garbled mess. And this kind of sonic experimentation, I'm usually very into it. It's usually pretty stimulating for me, but it just didn't feel that abrasive. It just didn't feel that destructive. After a while, sort of the degradation of the sound of the track just became kind of predictable, and it's like, okay, I can kind of hear where this is going, by 2 minutes into it, and then by the time it was just like this completely distorted mess, it was like, all right, I guess we're here now. The EP is okay, it's nowhere near as well written or as exciting or as catchy or as punchy as the Not the Actual Events EP. A few interesting and very dreary textures pulled up. It's very moody. If you enjoy Trent Reznor Reznor's more recent and more moody material. Maybe this EP will speak to you a little bit more, but you know, there are obviously some spots like The Lovers that is obviously just like, it could have used a little bit more writing, could have used a little bit more structure, could have used a little bit more melody. And the closing track here too, where it sort of, again, embarks on that sonic experiment that really doesn't pan out and doesn't stay interesting for its own duration. If I had to throw anything on this again, because there will be people pissed off in the comments, I could say I feel like a light to decent 6 on this thing. It's decent. It's okay. I'm not nuts about it. There are a couple of tracks on here that I think are pretty good, and you know, there's certainly nothing on here that leaves me feeling like, hey, I'm so much less enthusiastic about Nine Inch Nails now. I mean, actually, you know, at least some of the material here, and still that previous EP, does have me wondering where this is going. But you know, this is definitely not as mind-blowing to me or as blood-pumping to me as, you know, not the actual events. And we will leave it at that. Thank you very much for watching. Over here next to my head, when we hit that transition, there is the thing that you can go check out over there, which is the review of Nine Inch Nails, not the actual events EP. And I will catch you guys in the next video. You're the best. Love you forever.